You hear from Washington legend Santana Moss right there as he talks about everything that Stefon Diggs could potentially bring to this team, and that this is a potentially huge signing when you add a Santana Moss to a Terry McLaurin, to a Chiga Konkwu, to Bill in the backfield, and of course to a JD5. Marina, this has the potential of turning what on paper was already a good offense into what could be one of the best in the NFL.
I think you nailed it with the potential, right? I mean, I think there's still unknowns, especially on that lineup, and Santana Moss seemed to think that this was going to be number 2. But there's a question here. You've got a veteran commander with Terry McLaurin. You've got Chig there, like you said. What's the talk right now as to how these wide receivers line up in, the potential to start?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, Marina. And listen, Fox 5 has been all on top of this throughout training camp, not only speaking with the fans, but more importantly, speaking with that wide receiver room. And we want to be clear, coming into today, the last time that we spoke with them, those wide receivers to a man have told us that they felt confident within this wide receiver room and the guys that they had in the building prior to today. However, they did express to Fox 5 that if management made the decision to bring in another wide receiver, then they would open him with welcome arms. De'Ami Brown said that. Jalen Lane said that. Of course, Terry McLaurin said it as well, as did Luke McCaffrey. So each of the guys that are already in that wide receiver room have expressed out loud that if an addition was made, then this would continue to be one wide receiver family. So I don't anticipate that upsetting the proverbial apple cart here in Washington, D.C.
I mean, that was a great conversation you had yesterday with De'Ami. That was part of it. And you, like you said, every single person there seems to want this and is okay with it. Any talk about a little bit of the off-the-field antics, behavior maybe that comes along with Stefon Diggs? I mean, I think these are things that you have to talk about. Look at Buffalo Bills. There wasn't a great relationship there with QB1, Josh Allen. There's a potential always with these athletes. Has there been talk about that?
I think that's a great question as well, Marina. And though we have not heard from Commander's brass about any potential holdups over off-field issues, what it is, we did speak with Santana Moss, though. And what Santana Moss said is that, especially at that wide receiver position, you have to anticipate that many guys, especially who have played as long as a Stefon Diggs has, that they will have some past with them as well off of the field. But so long as they can come into the team and they can come into the locker room and contribute accordingly, then you have to accept that. The other thing, reportedly, this deal is 1 year and worth as much as $12 million. But the key to that is that it's 1 year. Stefon Diggs entering into his 12th season, there may not be very many more opportunities for him, especially if his off-the-field actions start to overshadow what it is that he brings on the field. And the last thing that I'll say about that, Marina, although we have seen Stefon Diggs have some situations that have occurred off of the field, what it is that we've seen at every spot that he's been in is he has made the quarterback and he has made the offense better. And I think that that's what Adam Peters, what Dan Quinn are banking on, is that you bring him in on a 1 year prove-it-to-me deal, and you hope that Stefon Diggs comes in here and makes Jaden Daniels and this entire offense even better.
That's huge. I think there's the incentive to stay and to make it all work. And it's a huge homecoming, too. I mean, this is a guy who's from here, from Montgomery County, a Gaithersburg native. Yeah. So it makes sense here. Chad, I know that there's a lot to talk about there at Ashburn for camp. So keep us posted. We'll see you throughout the shows. Thank you so much. Let's move on here, because any moment now, Governor Wes Moore will sign a redistricting amendment that was passed by the General Assembly, and that clears the way for new congressional district maps in Maryland. And Maryland Democrats say they are responding to a nationwide redistricting effort triggered by the president and that Supreme Court ruling. But the matter in Maryland yet to be settled. For now, we've got Professor Mark Graber back with the University of Maryland here, back with us. This is a huge hurdle. The General Assembly has passed it. The governor expected to sign it here. Anything here that can come from challenges from the Republican side?
Well, there will be challenges, in part because Republicans have lawyers, but the challenges don't appear to be particularly strong. So they note this was a session confined to one issue, but they were free to bring up other issues. They didn't have the votes.
Are there any technicalities? We talked a little bit about how the court struck this down over in the Commonwealth in Virginia on the timing issue, on how it was posted. Anything here that could, I mean, some would say grasping at straws, but maybe for the Republicans, it's an earnest effort.
Well, in Virginia, the claim was that they passed the amendment after the election had started because there was early voting going on for the election. Early voting is not taking place for the Maryland election now. So even if that was a constitutional rule in Maryland, which it is not, the rule would not apply.
Okay. The governor expected to sign this is overwhelmingly on the Democratic side. There is just one lone congressional district that's at the hands of Republicans, and that's the 1st District of Maryland. Andy Harris is right there on the Eastern Shore. Let's talk about what this looks like for the coming years, because right now this is just essentially clearing the way to redraw maps, but it doesn't really set or change any lines.
That's correct. The answer is Maryland state legislature after 2026 will redistrict. The difference is they will not have to obey the same rules when redistricting congressional districts as they do when they redistrict state districts.
Okay, so make the distinction here, because we're talking about the General Assembly districts, right? And then you're talking about the federal districts.
That's correct. The rules for redistricting state legislative districts are still in force. They must be compact. They must be contiguous. Equal votes, equal people, and they must respect subdivisions. We still have to respect one person, one vote in congressional legislative districting, but that's all.
Okay. Is this going to be really a huge change with that one seat? I mean, at the point where we are, I think we all know the answer, given the fact that we're so tightly divided here. But this is a state that's overwhelmingly blue.
Yeah, well, it's one seat, and who knows if it matters in Tennessee. It was also one seat. So everyone is grasping at any seats they can right now. The rule seems to be you don't want to be the first to partisan gerrymander, but you don't want to be the last either.
Interesting. Very new world here for gerrymandering, which has always been something that I know political science professors and professors like yourself have done the best to explain. And I think a lot of people are still confounded by how exactly it all works. Professor Mark Graber with the University of Maryland helping us break down the latest there in the General Assembly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's move on here, because the FAA is now investigating an air safety incident involving President Trump's Marine One helicopter, as well as Reagan National Airport. This all happened yesterday afternoon as the aircraft was lifting off from the White House. We've got Richard Luscombe, a reporter for The Guardian, to talk about what happened. And we should start, obviously, with the obvious fact that all eyes are on Reagan National after that jet collision over the Potomac. And again, some safety questions here as it regards the president and Marine One.
Good afternoon. Yes, the incident sort of seems to stem from that, or at least the investigation into it. The FAA have said they're investigating what's called a loss of separation incident, which means that two aircraft came too close to each other. One was the president's Marine One helicopter, which was taken off from Washington, from the White House. It took off at 2:33 p.m. yesterday. And what should have happened, but appears not to have happened, was that the airspace around Washington National would be closed and they would get a 3-minute warning of the president leaving. That appears not to have happened. And a passenger jet from Washington to Pensacola took off at 2:34 p.m., 1 minute afterwards. There's no indication that the two aircraft were on a conversion path. The FAA have said that there was no danger, or there didn't appear to be any danger of the planes colliding, but clearly they're taking it seriously enough to open an investigation into it. Now this afternoon, the National Transportation Safety Board has announced that his investigators are assessing the evidence to decide whether they're also going to open an inquiry.
Okay. Nonetheless, policy seems to have been breached as that 3-minute warning wasn't given. And as the crow flies from the White House over the Potomac to where presumably this jet was taking off, there's really not that much distance. And at that rate of speed, it could happen very quickly if there were to be an incident.
Correct. There's about 5 miles between the White House and Washington National. The FAA have said that the air traffic controllers were in contact with the pilots of both the helicopter and the passenger jet at all times, but we also don't know how close they actually came. You mentioned that crash that occurred in January of last year that killed 67 people when an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with a passenger jet landing at the airport. And after that, the FAA introduced close proximity rules, which means that no aircraft can be within 1.5 miles horizontally and 500 feet vertically around an airport. Like I said, we don't know exactly how close they came, but clearly they were close enough to warrant the investigation.
All right, we'll see if anything more comes from the NTSB as well. Richard, we appreciate your reporting. Thank you for that. Stay with us here on the DMV Zone. We'll be right back.